Hello, everyone. I am Aishan Hutchinson, the director of the Creative Writing Program here at Cornell, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the final event of the Fall 2020 Barbara and David Zalaznick Creative Writing Reading Series, At Home. The series is made possible thanks to the generosity of our donors, Barbara and David Zalaznick, to whom we extend our bountiful thanks. This evening, we are deeply fortunate to have with us Hortense and Alexis Gumbs, who will be introduced by my colleague, Professor Lyrae Van Clief-Stefanon. After their reading, Professor Van Clief-Stefanon will moderate a conversation with Spillers and Gumbs. You can participate in the conversation by submitting questions in the chat throughout the event. A final reminder that this event is being recorded. The recording will be available to view at the same URL. Now over to Professor Van Clief-Stefanon.
Good evening, everyone. I am so pleased to be able to moderate this conversation between two brilliant thinkers who I admire so much. Let's face it, I am a marked woman, but not everybody knows my name. Peaches and brown sugar, sapphire and earth mother, auntie, granny, God's holy fool, a Miss Ebony first or Black woman at the podium. I describe a locus of confounded identities, a meeting ground of investments and privations in the national treasury of rhetorical wealth. My country needs me, and if I were not here, I would have to be invented. So begins Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, an American grammar book, Hortense Spiller's landmark 1987 article, one of the most cited essays in African American literary studies. Have you ever before tonight heard a poet read those words aloud to you? And if not, I wonder if we might here tonight together ask ourselves, why not? The problematic core construct was that in order to be sane, which is to live in one body, which is to live one lifetime at one time, which is to disconnect from the Black simultaneity of the universe, you could and must deny Black femininity and somehow breathe. The fundamental fallacy being obvious now, obscured at the time, that there is no separation from the Black simultaneity of the universe, also known as everything, also known as the Black feminist, pragmatic, intergenerational sphere. Everything is everything. They thought escaping the dark feminine was the only way to earn breathing room in this life. They were wrong. This was their downfall. They hated the Black women who were themselves a suicidal form of genocide. So that was it. They could only make the planet unbreathable. So Alexis Pauline Gumbs writes early in M Archive after the end of the world. Think with me about the past decade. How many times have you heard the refrain, I can't breathe? Think about the past week, about the Black woman at the podium. Think about the coming months. Y'all can't hear me though. That's another way in the tongues I was brought up with to plead, can I get a witness? Hortense Spillers and Alexis Pauline Gumbs inspire witness. That is, they help make it possible for all of us to breathe. Point blank, period. Hortense Spillers is the Gertrude Conaway Vanderbilt Professor of English at Vanderbilt University. Since receiving her PhD from Brandeis, she has taught at Wellesley College, Haverford College, Emory, and in 2019, she was the M.H. Abrams Distinguished Visiting Professor at Cornell. She has been a recipient of grants from the Rockefeller Foundation and the Ford Foundation, and has been a fellow at the National Humanities Center. She founded A-Line Journal, an independent online magazine devoted to examination of national and world events through a theoretical lens. She is the author of Black, White, and In Color, Essays on American Literature and Culture. Alexis Pauline Gumbs is a community cherished and an aspirational cousin to you and everyone you know. She is the provost of the Eternal Summer of the Black Feminist Mind in Durham, North Carolina, and co-founder of the Black Feminist Bookmobile, Black Feminist Film School, and Mobile Homecoming Trust Living Library, an archive of queer Black brilliance. She is the author of Spill, Scenes of Black Feminist Fugitivity, M-Archive After the End of the World, and Dub Finding Ceremony. She is also the co-editor of Revolutionary Mothering, Love on the Front Lines. And before joining feminist studies as a creative writing editor, she was a contributing editor for the Feminist Wire. Please help me welcome Hortense Spillers and Alexis Pauline Gumbs.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Lyrae. That was lovely. I'm very glad to be here with you and Alexis. And I want to thank Aishan for extending this invitation to me to appear today in dialogue with Alexis. This is all pretty new to me. Not the dialogue with Alexis, but the format is something new. That's something I have to get used to, and I guess it's sort of a sign of what it's like to live in a pandemic and in the age of the pandemic. To talk just a little bit today about some questions that we will probably double back on in the course of conversation, either in Q&A or in the exchange we have at the end of our individual presentations. But what's on my mind, I guess, must be exhausting all the members of our audience, and that is the turmoil of the last 4 years, including the induced chaos of this ongoing election week. And as we speak, they're still counting votes. It's like they're never going to stop. But at the risk of exacerbating the exhaustion, I just want to sketch out a few questions that I have about what I would consider our collective future in this democratic republic. I am assuming that the dust will eventually settle, and the questions that we all have once that happens is, what do we do next? And at the top of my list, and the list of things that I've sketched, would be, I don't know, suggestions or recommendations or wishes that we incorporate in our activism and our desire for change, some considerations of many of these issues. I'm sure we think about them already, but I want to underscore them. And one of those has to do with the propaganda apparatus that we live in the midst of and in the grips of, that's fueled by a network of resources and outlets, Fox News chief among them. I've often wondered what animus is driving the antagonism of an outlet like Fox News that takes its character fundamentally from resentment and the politics that grows out of resentment. And it seems to me really a full-blown revanchist movement in the sense that what it has in its sights is a reversal of losses that are perceived to have been incurred by one group because of gains made by another group. And that's been going on for many decades, really, since the end of the civil rights era. And it seems to me that it's become increasingly a backlash, and it had its culmination in 2016. So I guess my question would be, what preparations are we making to fight back against this machinery that really isn't going to go away? I mean, I guess there really is such a thing as Trumpism, that this animus is embodied by, and that's certainly not going to go away even if the person doesn't go away. And it looks like in that person's case, winning is not enough because he's still on the horizon. So what do we do about a propaganda that apparently 71 million Americans embrace? A political party seems to be embracing to the very end. That's one of the fault lines, I think, that the last 4 years have revealed in the United States, in addition to a propaganda unlike anything I've seen before. I mean, I didn't grow up with a Fox News. As a matter of fact, when I grew up, there were only 3 channels, but three networks: ABC, NBC, CBS. And then, of course, cable news was added. And so now you've got, with cable news, multiple other outlets in a 24-hour news cycle. And it's thrown us into a different and perhaps more deadly and toxic political style. And it seems to me that our emphases are geared for another age or another time that's pre-digital. So I think some of that is going to have to be updated, particularly in the years ahead, assuming that the Biden presidency is going to go ahead. I think the civil war that has been a cold civil war so far might really break out into something else. I mean, that's really one of my fears. So the last 4 years has revealed, or the last 4 years have revealed that particular fault line, the danger of propaganda, but it's also brought out something that we never suspected before, and that is a system of checks and balances that is really predicated on a kind of gentleman's agreement. It assumes that all the principals are playing by the same rules and governed by the same goals. But there is no guarantee that that will be the case. And when there's no guarantee that that is the case, we see what happens. I mean, nothing that we're looking at just this week alone. I mean, say nothing of what's gone on since 2016, but nothing that we're looking at in the aftermath of this vote count is like anything we've seen before. And that makes me realize that the whole discussion about the Constitution, at least in its original days, took place between gentlemen, slaveholders, landholders who entertained a certain set of beliefs and shared a certain set of beliefs. And I think that assumption is baked into the Constitution itself, that it will always be that way, so that we now know that constitutional rule is not automatic. And so what needs to be done to shore up what seems to me from this vantage point a very fragile structure that's holding us on the planet at this moment. And then the other thing that I hope at some point we pay a little bit of attention to today is what I would call the oversupply of partisanship and the toxicity of that oversupply. I don't think I have ever seen the Republican Party behave the way it is behaving today. I mean, partisanship is certainly nothing new, but we are looking at a different order of magnitude with this denial of the outcome, the apparent outcome of the election. So it seems to me that that's partisanship that's taken to levels of toxicity that's absolutely dangerous to the democracy. And constitutions can't deal with that. The Supreme Court can't deal with that. That's something for the citizens to deal with, so that when we talk about levels of literacy in American society, I hope from now on we're going to be talking about not simply the measure of the percentage of people in a society who can read and write, but critical intelligence and the percentage of people who are willing to think for themselves and to be in danger in the face of uncertainty, so that obedience to a leader or a father is not needed. That's a few of the things that's on my mind. I'll be glad to hear what other people are thinking about this day as we still wait to hear what's happening with the vote in Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania.
Hortense, thank you so much, Hortense, for those opening comments. Alexis, do you want to jump in there?
Yes. now that my mind is blown, what do I even know? I love Hortense Spillers. You just are my favorite poem. Everything that you say is just, the way that you say it is, it's a gift, and it teaches me so much. So what I know is that all empires fall. I know that every empire is a story and holds within it the poetics of its own unraveling. And that's mostly what I do, listen to the unraveling of the story. So I am going to share 2 short pieces. One piece is from this book called Dub, which is an ancestral listening book. I think this is what I'm supposed to say. You could put the graphic of the book cover up. And this particular piece is from a section called Nananuk, which means grandmother, and it is from my Shinnecock grandmothers, and it is also my love poem to indigeneity at the fall of empire. What I didn't do: disappear, float out, forget, prove them right, drop the purpose of my fighting stance, leave my skin and story for buzzards. I did not. Do you hear me? What I did was generations, was the nation made into matron. What I did was keep my word to the shore. What I went through, it was more than the land and the store and the practices and the blood and the mud. We didn't know what it would be called eventually after the fall. We didn't know how permanent it would be. Like you, how could we? What I knew wampum and press. I knew how more became less. I knew the gate and the dress. I knew more than them. I knew words I wouldn't say and wouldn't teach and wouldn't name. I knew from the moment they came, we would have to keep knowing out our mouths. I knew touch and I knew truth. I knew age and I knew youth. I knew tenderness and proof. I didn't show it though. I knew bit lips to wait. I knew you wouldn't be too late. I knew the half was not our fate. I knew the game. But I did. I made and I made and I made. I spoke and didn't speak. I learned and didn't let on. I walked and did not faint. I stood and stood and stood. I fed and took away. I placed and faced it all. My name is platform and plate, is situation and state, is only rightly spoke by the 3rd generation and the folk. My name is purer than tanning stoke. My name is calloused hand in stroke. They don't remember it. So that's for Nananuk. And this next piece is from Undrowned, which is just about to come into the world, or maybe secretly did, but the official release date is November 17th. And this is a book of Black feminist lessons from marine mammals. And this particular piece is dedicated to my father, and it's also my love poem to Blackness at the end of empire. The scientific community believes that the Caribbean monk seal is extinct. The last verified sighting was in 1952, a couple of years before my father was born. Turns out, one of the very first things Columbus and them did when they got to the Caribbean was to kill monk seals, 6 of them, immediately upon arrival. They say the Caribbean monk seal, born Black and proud, was never afraid of the colonizers. And, in fact, they remained curious and calm. And the colonizers continued to use their own methods, which were fear-based and not calm at all, and genocidal. The oil in the blubber of Caribbean monk seals literally lubricated the machinery of the plantation economy. Without it, nothing could function. It is said that some plantations in the Caribbean required hunts for monk seals every single night so that the machinery for processing sugarcane could be smooth the next day. I cannot say that my father was a Caribbean monk, though there were a few transplanted and held in the New York Aquarium before he was born. They believe that by the time the Caribbean monk seal was placed on the endangered species list, it was already extinct. I cannot say that Clyde Gumbs, who died of prostate cancer diagnosed too late, was a Caribbean monk. I cannot say he was a monk at all. I can only say he had very few earthly possessions, and he wore the same outfit every day. I can say, yes, he had habits and rituals. I can say when he lived in the Caribbean, he observed the sunrise and the sunset every morning and evening, squinting through a small digital camera. I can say, yes, he was curious and calm, and some people took advantage. I can say he was born Black, but I cannot say that he was never afraid. What he died from, the opposite of a healthcare system, a machine that turns Black death into sugar, yes, I can say it is genocidal. Sometimes, usually in Haiti or Jamaica, people swear they see a Caribbean monk. The scientific community believes this is impossible, saying they are probably hooded seals out of range. But if you happen by some miracle to see him, will you tell him I say thank you for being Black and curious? Thank you for being calm and brave, and that I honor you for continuing to be who you were, no matter what they tried to turn you into, despite their hunting every night. And say I love you with a sweetness, not of sugar, but of salt that won't dissolve. I love you with a Black outliving empire in your name. Sunrise, sunset. Thank you.
Lovely. Great.
That was beautiful. Thank you both so much. Immediately, I'm thinking in terms of the conversation about a thing that you said, Hortense, in an interview, where someone asked you about Black feminisms, and you said, I am of the opinion that women who reach certain levels of management and privilege often forget something along the way, and that is the necessity to forge a different image of power. And I need to talk about that, like, given the comments, the remarks that you started off with, thinking about levels of literacy and critical intelligence. And what do we do to begin to forge a different image
of power? Yeah. What I had never anticipated was that I would reach this age and end up wondering if the feminist movement had had done its work. And I'm saying that because the vote, the woman's vote for Donald Trump, both times, the vote of white women was overwhelming in both instances. I think I heard the figure 57% of white people who voted for Donald Trump were women. And so that makes me wonder about the work of the feminist movement. And it makes me think that, well, okay, I guess I got some things wrong. I guess I did not realize the strength of racism, because it seems to me that that's there would have to be in that a racist dimension to a vote like that. I mean, if this man is perceived to be some kind of savior, I mean, that means at bottom there is an existential threat that community feels coming from Black people and people of color or non-white people. So the conversations that we have in feminism going forward, I think we'll have to take that into account. I mean, it seems to me that we really can't take another step until we look at the question of power and its relationship to women. And so I'm wondering if, for a lot of women, the women's movement was really about the advancement of ego interest. That, you know, I want women to be okay so that I can be okay. So that I can be empowered. But it really isn't about empowering a class or a group of human beings who have been left out of the picture. So that really is worrisome. So that it was very heartening for me to hear Kamala Harris, Vice President elect Harris, say the other night, and I guess you could call that an acceptance of the outcome, those speeches that they gave, when she said, while I might be the first vice president who was a woman, I will not be the last. And that means that she is projecting toward the future. And it seems to me that that's the one thing that perhaps feminist thinking or feminist practice or feminist performance in general has done less of than it should have done. And as women come into power, I do hope that they assume or show or perform power in ways that will be different fundamentally from what we're seeing right now. Because what we're seeing right now is killing us. I mean, it is killing us individually. It is killing the planet. It is killing the democracy. That we cannot continue to govern and to lead in ways that are paternalistic and male oriented, or that looks like the male. So that we have to talk about power differently.
Yeah,
I think. And we tend not to, because we want to say, well, just because XYZ is a woman doesn't mean that she can't be tough or she can't be mean or so forth. I mean, in other words, it seems to me what we want to give women permission to do is be empowered in the same way that we have seen power practiced before. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a failure. I think it is a failure of imagination. I believe that it is a surrender to fear. Mm-hmm. That it is that it gives in to certain impulses to terror. You know, I had better do it by the book, because if I don't do it by the book, I will somehow be punished. I'm hoping that all the branches of feminism, Black feminism, other families of feminism will reopen the question of power. What is it that Black women and women of color understand or understood that drove them to the polls, for the most part, in polar opposite ways? In 2016 and 2020. I mean, so what is it? So it seems to me it's very clear that what we have in common there is not sexual plumbing at all. That, and I used to think that, well, maybe that's enough. It isn't. So that since 2016, I've been in a state of shock, really, at what I thought I understood about women's movement in the United States. And I understood it incompletely or provisionally or partially. So this Grand Canyon that we're looking at between voting behavior among American women, so that you can just about bet that women of color and Black women are lining up on one side, and white women, for the most part, on the other side. How do you speak to that?
You know, I'm one of the things that stands out in what you're saying is that notion of like that doing it by the book, and even this conversation is my attempt in this setting to go against those straits of doing it by the book and what it is that people think that we're supposed to be doing, as opposed to what it is that we know we're supposed to be doing and not supposed to be doing. One of the first comment that came in that made me so very happy, the first question from the audience that came in was, what was the name of that first poem that you read? I wanted to happen. The opening of Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, that yes, that poetry. Yeah. And the working of people's like siloing of this is what this is supposed to be, and this is what this is supposed to be, and this is acceptable knowledge from over here, and your knowledge is not acceptable. One of the things that has to happen is breaking that down. And I feel like both of your work does that so beautifully. One of the things that Vice President-elect Harris did was she began her speech with that quote from John Lewis: "Democracy is not a state, it's an act." He talked about how there's joy in it. And I wanted to ask you all about, can you talk a bit about some of the joyful acts of democracy that you're seeing and in which you're participating in 2020 and about the roles of your work in those joyful acts, because one of the things that I think is going to work against some of the dangerous and toxic partisanship that you were talking about earlier, Hortense, and is that shifting of focus also towards joy. There's enough hate and toxicity out there right now. Where can we find the power in that joy and harness some of that to move forward? And I'm asking like Alexis and Hortense to kind of weigh in on that.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I wouldn't say I'm in a joyful practice of democracy. I mean, that's how I would categorize it. I mean, I do think that I'm in the practice of freedom, and I don't know very much about democracy as a practice because I have been, unraveling the lie of a story of democracy that has not been democracy, not in my lifetime, but I would say not in the lifetime of this unit, that we call this particular nation state, or when, I don't know. It's not a reference point that I have for something that I actually really practice through my body and through my gut. But there is a practice of freedom. I just think there's so much that I'm so excited about in what you all are both saying. And this piece, Hortense, that you talked about the ego and feminism and the ego and what it doesn't take into account. And I feel that a big part of what is not taken into account in self-serving forms of white feminism is, in fact, what must be destroyed in order for the world that I see envisioned by Indigenous feminists, Black feminists, feminists of color to actually exist. Like what do we have to let go of? And to frame that in terms of the ego, I think is so powerful, because I think that is it. There is an ego death in that. There is a death of the idea of self that is tied to this myth of democracy and this story about what it is to be human, right? Which is why it got me reading Sylvia Wynter over and over and over and over again.
Right.
So yeah, I would say that there's such a profound freedom in the poetics of even experimenting with what it means to go beyond that idea of conforming to a self. I think that's part of my immersion in marine mammals, and the interspecies longings that I'm acting on, that are about ways of being, and ways of being in collectivity, and ways of being in the face of extinction, that are also about how to let go of my ego, my idea of myself as a human person that should fit into a particular slot, that should reproduce a particular narrative, including democracy. So it's interesting, because I'm also anxious, and I'm seeing, like the lie of democracy is like, oh, it's not even like trying to lie anymore. It's like, I think that there's a moment when, for example, to put it on a different scale, when a violent person is trying to not seem violent in public, there is, that's not a safe person, but there's a modicum of safety in that that's different than a violent person who is really excited to show how violent they are. And, and we're the ones who are at the effect of their violence. And so I don't say that I am finding pleasure in the blatant violence that I see being enacted right in front of us. And I think that what's most exciting to me about this joy, and the other day, Hortense, you were bringing up the people dancing outside the polls in Philadelphia and the beauty of that, and the joy in terms of the different stories that activated Black and Indigenous women, for example, to do something that, if it's me, may not every day seem like the most inspiring thing to do, like to go to the board of elections or, whatever we had to do. There's another story, there's a story about alternate possibilities. There's a story about accountability to a collective that has never seen accountability from this form of the nation state. There's so much in that. Like there's a love there that does not originate in the American story and the US narrative, and cannot be contained by it either. And that I feel a lot of joy in, because that is a truth that I understand my being to be constituted by. That is the source of love that I've been benefiting from again and again and again. That's, I feel the love of Fannie Lou Hamer. I feel it, I feel it every day. And I believe in Fannie Lou Hamer. And I think that, yes, that form of love and freedom is a practice. It's not even a state of being myself. It actually causes me to let go of more ego than that. It is, it's a possibility. It's an emergence. It's, June Jordan said, a homemade field of love. It's a homemade field of love. That's what I would say.
As you were talking, Alexis, I was remembering one of the most joyful sights I have ever seen in my life. Took place outside or at a voting line in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And everybody must have seen the same footage. I mean, I was almost moved to tears as people waited. They did the electric slide. A drum line was introduced, I think somewhere in Brooklyn. It was amazing. And it was as if people were saying, look, you can do anything to us that you would like. You're not gonna stop us from voting. And while we wait 5, 6, 8 hours or more, we're just gonna dance. And it was amazing. And that is a note that's not customary in this society. I mean, the so-called dominant community does not roll that way. That ain't the way they roll.
True.
Yeah, I mean, that's joy on joy. Mm-hmm. One man was wearing a jacket, not a jacket, but a T-shirt. And I think we all know what that T-shirt must have said. But what the camera did was, when you're bleeping something out and you get that circular that doesn't show a face, mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. That the cameras do when there is an expletive that you can't say. Mm-hmm. Whatever that image was on that man's front was bleeped out, but the man was dancing shot out. And it was amazing to see. And it was just a line of people behind him following his lead. So it's a different performance of leadership. And it was just, it was wonderful.
Yes.
And joyful.
I wanted to ask you something that the three of us have talked about before, but not before an audience, which was, what are you all listening to? I'm really interested in the music of your work and the rhythms of it and the way that music is part of the process of your thinking. Hortense, like one of your really most important essays is like got the title of a Mingus song, and we talked about this a little bit. And so I wanted to ask you all about that. What is?
Well, you know, I can't. I think I can't write without music in the sense that, for me, music is another universe of inspiration. Mm-hmm. And it very much belongs to the interior. There are times when I find myself just breaking out in song, and I don't know why. And it's like, what do you do? In really strange places, you know, you're in bed going to sleep and you think of a tune, or you are going somewhere, or I don't know, and music breaks out. I think I hear speech that way, in the sense that for me, writing is a rhythm that I feel physiologically, right? And I know when I've gotten a sentence right, because whatever that physiological tension is resolves or is settled. And I can't do it until the rhythms are right. So that there are times when I end up counting syllables in words in a line. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I have to get a certain parallelism in, say, two sentences that are next to each other. Mm-hmm. Or if I hear an inadvertent rhyme in one sentence that's picked up in another, I have to change one of the words in the sentence. I think that's all the influence of music.
Hortense, that's part of why I'd be wanting to fight people when they try and talk to me about what poetry is and isn't, and imply to me in any way, shape, or form that you're not a poet. It makes me want to fight somebody.
Yeah.
Peaceful. Is it the same, Alexis, in your work?
I mean, have I reached the level of music in my writing as Hortense? One day, one day, that's my aspiration.
Get out of here.
But I do very much relate to it has to sound right to me. There is a rhythm. I find myself in my writing, I am listening, and in my editing, I am listening. Like that. It does have to sound right. That is actually how I know that I can stop editing. I'm like, oh, that's it. That's the sound. I do think of it as sound. I do very much hear it. I do tap. Like that's also a part of my process. And I listen to so much music. I mean, I've been excited about, I just love Jamila Woods' music so much, and what she's doing with the literary. I love what Esperanza Spalding is doing with her spells that are actually working. These spells are working magic in my life. Thank you, Esperanza Spalding, if you ever watch this. And I'm listening to Makaya McCraven. Really feel like I'm interested in what he's doing and who he's collaborating with. And Christian Scott, what's Christian Scott's whole name? Christian Scott Atunde. He got one more name. I love what he's doing and how he's collaborating. I've been listening. I mean, in this time, which I shared, I feel a lot of anxiety because I do feel like we're in the midst of a coup, and I don't know what it's going to be like to be in the other part of the Civil War that Hortense mentioned. I've been listening to Jason Moran playing Thelonious Monk. That's a very specific form of listening, but there's something very focusing about that to me, and there's a love there of someone I relate to, me being the type of person who will cite Hortense Spillers on every single page of a book. There's something about hearing someone playing the work of a person who deeply influenced them that resonates very, very deeply with me. So yeah, I am trying to be in rhythm. I am trying to be in harmony. I am interested in those layers of complexity that for me are felt and heard. And yeah, I love hearing you describe your process, Hortense, because this is why I feel the way I feel when I hear you speak and when I read your work, because you have composed a space for us to understand differently, feel a different possibility. And I'm glad I get to live there.
You think we're looking at a coup?
Yes.
Oh,
I mean, I hope not, but it's what it looks like to me.
My goodness, okay, somebody else said that.
I mean, when somebody who's not elected don't concede power, that's a coup. I mean, it's happened in many countries many times, and I mean, I feel like it's also happened in this country before. But that's things are not always called by their name, but that's not what I want to happen. But
yeah,
I'm seeing coup-like behavior.
So we're running out of time, and they're asking us to wrap it up. But the question from
talking about a coup
from the audience, a follow up to something that you had said, Alexis. What I know is that all empires fall, and someone from the audience asks, how do we hold on to knowledge? All empires fall alongside effects of fear and love. How do we begin from and move in this tension?
Mm-hmm.
So,
oh, I love that question. Yeah, good question. I'm glad that someone is thinking about that. I think maybe many of us are thinking about that. I would say for myself, I'm really excited to hear what you think, Hortense, but I would say that that knowledge, and a dear friend here in Durham had those words, all empires fall, in a beautiful art exhibit. Zaina Al-Sus, the great poet and sister friend. And those words, even though they are, boding chaos, they are profoundly comforting. And to me, the way that I move into that love is to think about who am I with? Who am I with in this experience across time? Right? So as we sit here and we see white supremacist voter suppression right in front of us, I'm with Fannie Lou Hamer, right? And I'm thinking about my love for Fannie Lou Hamer. I'm thinking about her genius. I'm thinking about how many different ways can I be intimate with that energy that understands that the worst things that should never happen, horrifying things, do happen and have happened and have not meant the non-existence of this through line of love that I am experiencing. What does it mean for me to practice and focus on these forms of time travel and connection and love that are not actually knit together by the story of this nation, but are actually part of a different story that's being suppressed the whole time, but that I'm accountable to and could not even exist without. So that's what I would say. I think that's what we do. Like we look at the fall of empires. We look at the stories that were not told about what am I honestly doing? I'm honestly studying what did Arawak what did my Arawak ancestors say about the stars? And what were those conversations? And what were the stories about about ways of being that have been silenced by the empire put on top? And how can I be in communion with that? That's what my poetry is every morning right now. And so that's what I would say. I would say, what are the practices? What are the forms through which to practice the love with those of our relatives who we decide to be related to, who have experienced something like what we are experiencing and may experience.
Mm-hmm. Hortense, you get the last word.
Well, I was thinking as Alexis was talking that we live on more than one dimension, or we live through more than one dimension, and one of those dimensions is the intimate. And I think in the space of the intimate, life goes on, and I think it's there that love and integrity and wellness and a sense of oneself must be maintained, even if chaos is falling down all around us, right? And so it's that dimension, I think, that that Alexis is addressing, and I think that's the space that I guess must always be a clean, well-lighted place. Any way to put it, that we have to do housekeeping there all the time. And I think if we do, I think we'll be okay. Whatever happens, whether empires, well, they do fall. Alexis is right there, but somehow I think maybe this one will be spared. I hope that's right. But that intimate dimension, I think we have to keep that. We have to keep that up. We can't. I guess what I'm saying is we can't lose ourselves in the chaos,
yes,
right, of the nation state and of empire. We can't lose ourselves there. We have to repair to that other place, that separate piece.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. I love you both so much.
I love you both.
All right.
Thank you all.
Love you dearly. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.